Raj Patel's journey, Flight 203, and the battle for dignity. Raj Patel adjusted his collar as he settled into his window seat on Flight 203. The weight of his military service medals, carefully packed in his carry-on, reminded him of his years of service to both India and America. At 42, his face bore the lines of someone who had faced both struggle and triumph. Today was supposed to be a joyous occasion. He was flying home to surprise his mother on her 70th birthday. The afternoon sun streamed through the small oval window, casting a warm glow. Passengers filled the plane around him. A young mother with a restless toddler smiled as she wrangled her child into the seat nearby. Across the aisle, an elderly couple nodded politely, their demeanor serene. Raj checked his watch and thought of his mother's reaction when she saw him at her door. After moving to the U.S. 15 years ago and serving in the Army, his visits home had become rare. This trip was a chance to reconnect. In his bag, next to his medals, was a beautiful silk sari he had carefully chosen as her birthday gift. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his sister, who was in on the surprise. "On the plane now. Keep Mom busy tomorrow afternoon." As he hit send, Flight Attendant Lisa Matthews walked down the aisle. Her practiced smile faded as her gaze settled on Raj. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Sir, I need to check your bag," she said. Her tone clipped. Raj looked up, confused but polite. "Of course," he replied, reaching for his neatly stored carry-on. "Is there a problem?" Lisa's voice carried a sharpness that made nearby passengers look up. "Just routine," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "We've had some security concerns." Raj's heart sank. He recognized that tone, that look. He had faced it before, though it never got easier. Remaining calm, he said, "My bag is regulation size. I made sure to check before boarding." The young mother in the next row glanced over, concern etched on her face. Her toddler stopped fidgeting. Sensing the tension, the elderly couple exchanged uneasy glances. Lisa's voice grew louder. "Sir, I need you to comply with my request immediately." Raj took a deep breath, willing himself to stay calm. "I am complying," he said softly. "Would you like to see my military ID as well?" But the mention of his service seemed to agitate Lisa further. She stepped back, reaching for her radio. "Are you threatening me?" "Sir," she said loudly. Her accusation froze the cabin. Phones were lowered. Conversations halted. All eyes turned to Raj, a man who had served 2 nations, now facing an unexpected battle. "Ma'am," Raj began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I am not threatening anyone. I'm simply trying to understand what the concern is. I'm happy to cooperate." By now, other flight attendants were moving toward the scene. Passengers pulled out their phones. Sensing something was about to happen, the young mother clutched her child tightly. The elderly couple whispered disapprovingly, their faces marked with quiet outrage. Lisa spoke into her radio, her eyes fixed on Raj. "I need security at Gate 12. We have an uncooperative passenger. Possible security threat." The words hit Raj like a blow. In his carry-on, his medals clinked softly, reminders of his years protecting others. The irony wasn't lost on him. An unfolding nightmare. Minutes later, heavy footsteps echoed in the cabin. Through the window, passengers saw 3 airport police officers approaching the plane. Lisa stood at her post, her face resolute. Raj sat still, his military training guiding his every move. The young mother next to him hit the record button on her phone, capturing everything. The first officer entered, his hand resting casually on his weapon. Behind him, the others followed, their faces stern. "Sir," the lead officer called, his voice commanding, "stand up and come with us." Raj's voice remained calm. "Officer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I'm happy to explain." "Stand up now," the officer barked, cutting him off. "This is not a discussion." Lisa added, "He was being aggressive when I asked to check his bag. I felt threatened." Passengers stirred, disbelief spreading among them. The elderly man across the aisle finally spoke up. "That's not true," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "We all saw what happened. He was polite the entire time." The officers ignored him. One reached for Raj's arm. "Stop resisting," the officer barked, though Raj hadn't moved. "I'm not resisting," Raj replied evenly. "I'm cooperating fully." As the officers pulled him into the aisle, phones captured every moment. His military ID fell from his pocket, clattering to the floor. Lisa watched silently, her earlier confidence now tinged with doubt. "This is wrong," someone called from the back. "He didn't do anything." The aftermath. Dragged off the plane, Raj stood in the cold jet bridge, surrounded by officers. They patted him down, finding nothing. Inside the plane, passengers, led by the elderly couple and the young mother, demanded answers. Many began to disembark and protest, vowing never to fly with the airline again. Hours later, Raj sat in his sister's living room. His bag, now returned, held his medals and the silk sari for his mother. His phone buzzed nonstop with messages and calls. Videos of the incident had gone viral, sparking outrage. Hashtags like #JusticeForRaj and #RespectOurVeterans trended worldwide. Veterans organizations, civil rights groups, and public figures rallied to his cause. The airline issued a statement, deeply regretting the incident, but it wasn't enough to quell the growing storm. Raj's mother, watching the news coverage, called him, "My son served 2 countries with honor. They cannot treat him like this. We will fight," she said, her voice firm, a movement for change. The next day, Raj stood before a crowd of supporters in his sister's front yard. Veterans in uniform, community leaders, and passengers from the flight gathered to stand with him. Holding the silk sari, he addressed the media. "Yesterday, I boarded a flight to surprise my mother for her birthday," he began. "Instead, I was humiliated and treated like a threat. But this isn't just about me. This is about every person who has been judged by their appearance, every veteran who has been disrespected. We deserve better. We demand better." His words resonated far beyond the crowd. Airlines across the country began revising their policies. Diversity and cultural sensitivity training became mandatory. The airline responsible for Flight 203 launched a scholarship fund for veterans' children, naming it the Flight 203 Future Leaders Scholarship. Raj's medals, once jingling unnoticed in his bag, were now displayed in a civil rights museum alongside the silk sari. His story became a symbol of resilience and change, a legacy of unity. 1 month after the incident, Raj stood at a podium outside the airline's headquarters. Behind him were hundreds of supporters, including the young mother, the elderly couple, and his own family. "My mother taught me to stand up for what's right," he said, "and on Flight 203, passengers stood with me. Together, we showed that dignity and respect are rights worth fighting for." The crowd erupted in applause, but Raj's thoughts were with his mother. Later that evening, they finally celebrated her birthday. As she draped the silk sari over her shoulder, she smiled and said, "Sometimes, the best gifts aren't the ones we plan." Raj's journey wasn't over, but he had already made a difference. Flight 203 had become more than an incident. It was a movement, a reminder that change begins when people stand together against injustice.